From the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, this is the SDM Show with your host, Rob Cairns. The SDM Show focuses on business, life, productivity, digital marketing, WordPress, and more. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. Here is Rob.
Hey everybody, I'm Rob Cairns. I'm the founder, CEO, and chief creator of Amazing Ideas at Stunning Digital Marketing. In today's podcast, I sit down with Thomas Raef, and Thomas and I get really geeky talking about WordPress security. Sit back, relax, grab a drink, enjoy the show. This podcast is sponsored by Stunning Digital Marketing, the agency that can help protect your WordPress website today. Go to stunningdigitalmarketing.com and see what we can do to help you protect your business investment. That's stunningdigitalmarketing.com. Hey everybody, good morning. Rob Cairns here. Today I'm here with my guest, Tom Raef, a security expert. How are you today, Tom?
Doing well, Rob. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. I thought I've followed you a long time online. We were chatting before we came to record, and I've watched a number of shows you've done, a number of videos you've done. One lately with Kathy Zant, and you've done, I think you did one with Nathan Wrigley, if I recall right.
Yep. Yeah, WP Builds.
Yeah, Nathan's a good friend, and I thought, well, I think I needed to get you on here. So I'm glad you joined me. Thank you for coming.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity.
You're welcome. So I wanted to sort of jump in real quickly and find out how you got into security. It's always interesting, and I was sharing with the story, and many listeners know one of the reasons I like security is because I fell in love with teachings of guys like Kevin Mitnick in the day, and we all know Steve Jobs and Wozniak were old phone freak hackers and fell in love with those guys. And I'm an old-time, you and I aren't that far apart in age, I'm an old-time computer hacker going back to BBSs and dial-in modems and all that good stuff. So how'd you start off?
I got started, I've been in computer industry. As I tell people, IBM has 1 month more of PC experience than I do. I think they announced the first IBM PC in September of 81. Mm-hmm. And I started in an Entree Computer Center a month later, selling IBM PCs, and that selling was okay, but I really liked getting into the nuts and bolts of it. So I started doing consulting projects just before IT consulting was really a thing, and just kind of jumped into it. And then along comes the Melissa virus, the I love you virus.
Oh yes.
And you remember that from a long time ago. And I was very intrigued as to like what it did, how it spread, and being a programmer from way back also, I was just curious, and so I happened to get a hold of it and was, trying to pick it apart and see what it did and why, and then as things grew, and as you mentioned, Wozniak and Jobs and Mitnick, all those guys, hearing about them and things that they were doing, although they were more, I think, on the social engineering side of things.
Very much so, Kevin. Yeah, especially Kevin.
Even before that was a term. But so it was just, interesting. And, my, you and I talked about hockey, and when I played hockey, I was always defenseman. And so, I just have that natural aptitude for defending things. And so, I started looking at, how can I protect people from more viruses? And, you think that the virus situation would go away. It didn't. It just got worse and worse. So, I started leading down that path. And, I had built in let me think now. In 2005, 2006, I was working on building my own security box for small businesses.
Okay.
I think they called it like a unified threat management,
Yep.
UTMs. So like for a small business, it would filter your email, block viruses, control what websites you could go to, yada, 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 protect the inside of a small business. And in doing that, I was using the open source software called Provoxy, Privoxy. And what that allowed you to do is filter um, um, content coming in from websites. So I built up a block list. So anytime I saw like new JavaScript malware come out, I would write a regular expression for it so Provoxy could block it to again protect my customers on the inside. So but in analyzing JavaScript, it led me to a website called
Oh,
badwarebusters.org,
yes.
which was run by Max Weinstein, a
Yep.
guy out of Harvard, and supported by Google. So when Google would send you a notification at your website, this site may harm your computer moniker on your search engine results, they would send you to Badware Busters for some free help.
Mm.
And Daniel Sid of Security, he and I were the top two um, volunteers. So every time you'd help somebody in this forum, they could rate you. They give you a rating. And Daniel and I had, I don't know, whatever the highest was, and he and I would go back and forth, and it was a friendly competition between he and I. We both had mutual respect, and
Really.
so one day I was just like, you know what? There's so many people with infected websites. I think I'm just going to focus on that. And that was 2007. I started We Watch Your Website and never looked back.
It's really interesting. You talk about the early viruses, and you were talking about I Love You, and I was thinking about Michelangelo's birthday. And in those days, and this was when we all had small hard drives, I dreaded that day being a support guy because we all know I would get 30 calls in a day saying, I have a virus. It's Michelangelo. And, and we remember that one, and it would wipe the boot sector off the hard drive at the time.
Right.
And
Yep.
then the other ironic thing is the late John McAfee, who started McAfee Antivirus. McAfee was a virus creator himself at one time. So he's an
Mhm.
interesting character, and he's another one we've lost, a brilliant mind who we've lost way too soon. But
Yeah.
it's funny. It's funny as a guy who understands security. I have to admit, maybe I shouldn't admit this publicly, but I don't run a virus checker on my computer. I never have. I just refuse.
Really.
I'll do a scan from outside it, but I do not run a real time
Uh,
because the way I do scans and checks is I do them in a virtual machine and then I delete the virtual machine when I'm done. So I
gotcha.
don't play that game. But
Uh, yeah.
so it's
I can't go that. I can't go that route. I'm too nervous. I see, every day what hackers can do,
I
and
know.
I just I can't. So yeah, I run. I'm a PC guy, so I
Yeah.
run Microsoft Defender,
Yep.
which has gotten much better. I used to bash it all the time in the forums.
It has gotten better. No
It's
question.
gotten so much better, and then I typically run that in conjunction with Malwarebytes because Malwarebytes plays
Yep.
nicely with everything.
Yeah, it seems
So
to. I would agree. If you're going to do that, the other thing key to security, I think, I have a little saying in my business is it's not if you'll get hacked, it's when and how do you recover? And I really mean that. And so to give listeners an idea and give you an idea, in the last year, I've had my credit card compromised 5 times in the last year and a half and used in places including Tokyo, Japan, where I've never been. I've had my bank account physically hacked by somebody in China. They actually put money in 3 years ago and tried to take money out on the back end. And fortunately, I was in the account when it was happening and managed to freeze it all. So bye-bye hacker. That it turned out, I don't know if people know or you know, but the Canadian Revenue Agency in Canada has been hacked multiple times, and it's the only place my bank information is. So I suspect the government is the weakest link. But so I've
common
had,
denominator.
yeah, I've had that happen. I've had numerous friends. We all get people who don't understand the difference between a hack and a spoof, right? I mean, people run around saying, "Oh, my Facebook profile's been hacked. There's a duplicate hack." No, your profile hasn't been hacked. Somebody created a lookalike. So we've got that mess running around, and then an assortment of things. As a business owner, do you see the problem with small businesses and backups? And that's a favorite topic of mine. How many small business owners do you see that never test their backups?
Oh, a lot. But I got to say, right now I focus primarily in the website world. That's what we
Yep.
do is
Yep.
website security. And I got to say that for the most part, um, I don't know numbers, but I'd say guess 90% of websites have good backups,
Yes.
or they think they do. There's the old saying. I used to tell people, "Oh, you got two types of data that's backed up and data that's lost. Guess which one you got?" And it's it sounds snotty, and I apologize, but it's a lot of people never test their backups, so they're thinking that, okay, yeah, I've got backups and I've got backups of backups, and I've got this and that offsite, and I've got local backups, and like, have you ever tested them?
Yeah.
No, why? Well, you don't know until you need it, and then it's not there. So, but yeah, to answer your question, I think a lot of small businesses, um, outside their website, suffer greatly from lack of backups. But I honestly think that the website world has gotten much better over the years.
Yeah, I think so too. I know primarily I look after on security care plans about 350 WordPress sites, give or take, depending on what the flavor of the day is. So I've got a few. I know normally when I take on a new website, and somebody comes to me and says, "I've been hacked. I'm looking at one right now." And I got to tell you, if people would just learn to keep their sites up to date, that would solve half the problem. This guy's running an old version of WordPress. He's running old plugins. They haven't been updated. And he doesn't know where he put his good backup. You're laughing, but you've seen this before. Um,
Yeah.
what do you think about that in the WordPress world?
Well, you know, um, I, I went deep dive over this past week because we have a freemium version of our service that people can put on a web server, um, and it checks for all website file changes, additions, and modifications. Um, it checks we get um, real time updates on their database, and we get real time uh, streaming of their log files. So we know exactly what's going on. Now, it doesn't do any prevention, and it doesn't do any automated remediation. The free version is just for monitoring. But the information that we've been able to gather from that um, points, a lot of people, everybody seems like in the WordPress security world says that uh, you know, majority of websites are hacked due to outdated plugins and themes. And uh, our analysis shows that's not the case. It's more authentication,
Yes, I would
stolen
agree.
authentication than it is plugins. Because, you think about this year, the last big exploit was the essential Elementor add-ons light,
Yep.
which caused havoc, and that was huge. But since then, there hasn't really been any big plugin exploits. You know, no really real big 0-day exploits released, but yet hackers are still making money off of hacking sites. So when you dive deep and you see, how they're maintaining themselves, it's like, oh yeah, okay, well, even if you had all your plugins, um, updated and your themes, and you had 2FA enabled on your login, the problem is with this a stolen session cookie.
Yep.
It totally bypasses 2FA.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're authenticated. You don't need 2FA authentication because you're
That's
already
correct.
authenticated. So, I mean, it's huge.
Yeah, and it's getting to be like a big problem. I also don't think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think people are capable of DIYing security. They can DIY a website. They can't DIY security. They don't understand what's going on out there. They don't understand how it's going on. They don't understand what to do. They have no clue about what exploits are major and what are not major. I mean, the only
Right.
the only big one I know on the WordPress side we just recently saw 6.3.2 release, which had all kinds of security fixes in it. And
Right.
to be fair, the only reason they put that out was because 6.4 is like weeks away at this point.
Knocking on the door. Yeah.
Yeah, we're in at the time of this record, we're into release candidate 2, and release candidate 3 is scheduled to come out on later this week. It's going to be delayed by a day, but it's not going to change anything. So it's knocking on the door. So for them to do that, they must have seen something in those concerns of 6.3.2. But I think the average person can't keep up to date with this stuff anymore. It's just
No,
not possible.
it's I saw in the Cloudways Facebook group that people
Yep.
were complaining because they just Cloudways just enabled patch stack,
Mhm.
and people were getting inundated. Like, people weren't concerned about updating their plugins on all their client sites. They
Yep.
were asking how to turn off the notifications from Cloudways that they had so many outdated plugins. So, I mean, when you think about that, you're like, okay, you're not trying to handle the real problem. You're trying to turn off notifications so that you're not, bugged so much by, what do they call it? Notification,
Yep.
death by notification, or something like that. They've got some cute term for it, but um, yeah, and like I said, and that's just outdated plugins and themes and core. Um, the other interesting thing about I think it was a cross-site scripting vulnerability with the 6.3.2, but
Yep.
was it? Yeah, but WordFence came out with their announcement on that, and then they also put in there that um, all their customers are safe from that because of their, they have specific firewall rules for, each individual exploit.
They
But then
do.
they also have like general cross-site scripting and SQL injection prevention rules in their firewall. Well, their general rules were preventing the cross-site scripting um, vulnerability from being successful. And so even if you had their free version of the WordFence firewall, um, you were protected from that. So um, it sometimes, yeah, DIY for security, it's tough to do. I always laugh when these guys on from Fiverr or some of these other
Mhm.
guru.com, and oh yeah, I do malware removal. Like, do you really? Because
Yeah.
I've seen stuff that you're never going to see because it's outside the standard WordPress file system.
Mhm.
And I've seen that since like 2009.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. It's a bit of a you can't do virus removal for $20. I hate to tell you, it's just not
Right.
to do it effectively, right? We both know it's a time consuming process.
Yeah.
It's not an easy process. And I'll bet when you see a site or I see a site, they're usually pretty bad by that point. So you're not kind of looking. And then it's not just doing the removal, it's hardening the site so that you don't have problems down the road. I mean, that's the other problem. There's no point. I have one client, quite ironically, I did major removal for them. And they were sending out pharmacare spam and Bitcoin spam, our wonderful mess. Cleaned it all up, and I wrote them a report of things they need to do to harden their site, and said I can do it free of cost. And they were a nonprofit, and their board wouldn't approve the expenditure. So no sooner did the board turn down the expenditure than guess what happened? They got
Ransomware.
hacked again. They
Oh,
got hacked again because the same issues that I cleaned up, they put back in because
sure.
they didn't want to do all the extra work. And then they kind of looked at me and said, "How could this happen? You just cleaned it." I said, "You remember that report I sent you that you chose not to do anything about?" Well, guess what?
Yeah, you
Yeah.
hate to be, snarky at that point, but when you lay it out for people and then they just choose not to do it, you're like, okay, you know,
So
best of luck.
if you were setting up a new WordPress site today, say we do a scratch, what are the first three things you would sort of gear at to lock it down real quickly?
Um, well, first of all, I don't give anybody admin rights to my WordPress site.
Thank you very much.
Um, I just don't, and people are like, well, you asked them from us. I'm like, yeah, but I know that, excuse me, I know it's not going any further, and I know I'm not going to have cookies stolen from my system. I know that the
Yep,
username and password is not going to be stolen from my system because of all the security steps that I do.
yep,
So yeah, the first thing is SEO, SEO guy or girl um, wants to help me with SEO. That's fine. I'll set up a staging site for you to use, but
yeah.
my live site, nobody gets it.
By the way, not to derail you, I once had an SEO guy for a client told me they had needed cPanel access for a site hosted on my server, and I looked at them and said, "No, no SEO guy needs that kind of access." And the client actually moved his website off because of it and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I own my site." I said, "You do, but I'm not giving it to him because this is a security issue." So like
Right.
So while we're talking about that, it's worth mentioning we need to get into this, and this is what you're doing. You're only giving access that's needed. So we need to get into the enterprise mode where you go to a bank and the bank teller doesn't have access to all the financials in the bank, right? She only has what she needs. We need to start doing that with WordPress sites, right?
Right. I did a YouTube video. I never got any traction because I never really promoted it at all. But it's all about transitive trust.
Yes.
If I hire a marketing company out of I don't care wherever they are,
Mhm.
um, and they farm out, they use some white label services to help them with different parts of the marketing, um, and they share my the logins I gave to them. They share them with somebody else, and then so let's say that person contracts out for driving traffic to websites that they're working on. Well, you know what? Hackers make tons of money off of driving traffic to websites. So chances are the hacker could have access to my website because of this transitive trust. I trusted John, John trusted Mary, Mary trusted
Yep.
Joe, and you know, on it goes. So yeah, I don't.
Yeah. So that's the first thing. What's the next thing you would do?
The next thing I do is um, one of two parts. I'm a firm believer, and I know from my experience how much blocking ranges of IP addresses I know how effective that is, because you can't tell me that there's any valid reason. And in 2017, I was the one to give a security talk at the cPanel conference down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So you got all these web devs in there. I'm like, all right, anybody give me a valid use case for why a website from Bluehost should be trying to log into my site hosted, wherever.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, no. Nobody could come up with a valid reason. So why not just block by default all hosting providers' IP addresses? They all have ASNs, the autonomous system numbers. So it's pretty, well, it's not easy, but it's pretty direct to get those and then expand those all into IP address ranges, whether they be class Cs or whatever, and put that into a block list, but block it at the layer 4. Don't block it at the website. Don't block it at the Nginx, rules, or, something at the application layer, in a security plugin. That's too late in the equation. Block it in like IP tables or UFW. And it's we did that for one client overseas in the UK. He had a site that was, getting attacked all the time, not successfully, but it was getting attacked. So we put up our rules on there, and in one day we blocked over 21,000 attacks at the server level. He says, well, I didn't even notice any slowdown. Right, because it's happening at the right stage in the communications.
In the communications. I've got some political clients for political parties, and they have the same problem. The bots and the people who hate political parties are just out there. You look at the logs, and it's ridiculous. And and it's in the same numbers. And they're like, we don't even see it. And I said, yeah, because you take care of it at the top level. So.
Right. I don't care if it's, Microsoft Azure servers attacking WordPress websites, Google Cloud, Oracle's cloud. Pick a cloud hosting provider, and I guarantee you, their servers are in our lists, on a daily basis.
Yeah. And what would be the third thing you would do?
I would block by. This is gonna throw everybody into a tizzy. I would block by user agent.
I like that.
When you see an attack, now I know that the user agent is something that's spoofable, but when you see the number of attacks coming from an IP address, and like we saw, we had one yesterday, Chrome version 59. Well, the current version is like 118.
Yes.
If you've got somebody trying to visit, if you've got a legitimate user trying to come to your site and they're using Chrome, 59 or whatever the heck it was, do you really want them, as a visitor to your site? No, just block it, because chances are it's some script kiddie that's using an old tool that they just never updated the user agent on. And like I said, there again, it's one of those things that we've tracked. It's highly effective. So those three things: would not give out my username and password, no admin rights to my WordPress site, block IPs to all hosting providers around the world, and set up some you can set up some regular expressions. So like on really tight sites, what I like to do is set it so that it checks for the Chrome, Safari, Edge, whatever version, and it can only be like 10 versions behind, because most of these browsers nowadays automatically update. When there's a new security update to be applied, they automatically update. So, and that's just my hypersensitivity. So I set it so like right now, if the current version of Chrome is 118, if you come in with anything lower than 108, you can't even visit my site.
I don't think you're being over hypersensitive. I would be saying, why would you let a vulnerable piece of software at your site anyway to start with, right? So I think that's just a really good move. In the WordPress world, people like to solve problems by plugins. And You know where I'm going with this, don't you?
Uh-huh,
So
uh-huh.
we got some big security players out there. We got WordFence, we got PatchStack, who I happen to like. I think they provide some interesting stuff. I think Oliver Sid and his team does a really good job. I won't voice my opinions of WordFence on this podcast because I've already voiced them in more ways than one. And then you've got people like Solid WP, which is a stellar brand with their new rebrand, which is Solid Backup and Solid Security, the old iThemes products. And then
Right.
there's several others that do everything from 2FA to firewalls to you name it. How do you feel about people running some of these plugins to help themselves along the way and do some of that stuff?
Um, some of them I feel are legit. Um, a number of them I am personal friends with. I
Yep.
met Mark Maunder from WordFence. I met him at WordCamp,
Okay.
US. And it was funny because people would come up I went to his booth, and he and I had talked before. We had a little bit of a spat on Twitter, but then we settled it with a phone call, and we're like, yeah, okay. And and Mark said, hey, if you're going to be at WordCamp, let's connect. I'd like to meet you in person. So we did, and people were coming up to me afterwards like, did I see you with your arm around Mark Maunder?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why? Like, I mean, the guy's accomplished a lot. But
Yeah.
so anyway, to answer your question, um, the security plugins, like I said, with something like WordFence, where they have, whether you're doing the paid or the freemium version, if you do the
Mm.
paid, when they come out with the new, when there's a new exploit announced and they have a firewall rule, I think they push it out to the freemium people like 30 days later.
Yeah.
But
That's
you also have to look at the fact that they, like their generic rules for cross-site scripting and SQL injection and things like that, are there for the freemium, their free version as well, and that blocks a lot. So, um, you know, being dependent on a plugin, a security plugin, I could honestly say I would never endorse that. Um, you need it. As they always tout about defense in depth. And you
Yep.
need multiple layers. And
I
so,
agree. Yeah.
I'm not saying that like blocking IP addresses and blocking user agents like we do is the end all be all. It's another layer, but it happens early enough that there's no drag on your system. We use very little, server resources for that.
Yeah. Sure.
Some of the others, when people start saying that, I saw an interview for a large hosting provider recently, and they talked to the security guy, and he was saying that 95% of all hacks are through outdated plugins and themes.
Mm.
First thing is you're pulling that number out of thin air because you have
No idea.
knowing what their service does, they don't they have no way of collecting data to prove that.
Hmm.
Um, and the data that we've collected shows, almost the opposite. It's not it's not 95% one way and 5% the other way. It's a lot more even. And when you think about, okay, when there's not a huge plugin or theme or core vulnerability, but yet sites are still getting hacked. Like you think that hackers like just take a vacation when there's no major exploits going on, or are they finding other ways? They're finding other ways because their income depends on it.
No question. And we've seen during COVID, hack attempts have actually gone up and not down because they were all stuck at home with everybody else on board. So they just kind of reached out to find ways.
Right.
Um, Another controversial topic that I like to call is backups. Backups at the hosting level, backup at the site level, or both. What do you prefer?
I say both.
Okay.
You can't. Um, we've seen numerous instances where people will restore a backup from like a month ago,
Hmm.
and the backup files are infected.
Yep.
So they really had no idea how long they've been infected,
Hmm.
and that seems to be the case more and more, especially you know, as you mentioned earlier, you can't do effective malware removal for $20, but I think people are always looking for that. So they settle for that, and then they don't realize that, oh, something was missed and my site's been infected for actually a couple months now.
Yep.
And, so yeah, backups are critical. I strongly suggest, um, you know, on, you know, on-site backups. I see a lot of files with the extension of .wpress, um, and GZ files, zip files, things like that, stored up on websites that are just backups, which is fine. But also you have to store those off-site somewhere.
Yep.
Whether it's your local desktop or a Amazon instance somewhere, whatever. It needs to be stored multiple places. How about you? What's your thoughts on that?
I do both. We've seen major web hosting companies have their backup servers hacked. It happened to W3 Hosting in Montreal. It happened to A2 Hosting in Europe. It happened to Melbourne IT, the biggest host in Australia, a number of years ago. It's happened all over the place. So I do both. And I actually store my backups on a Synology NAS server. And then I have another Synology NAS that's offsite at a friend's that I pay for storage. And Synology has a cool sync software that syncs the two. So they
Hmm.
sync in the middle of the night. So I not only do I have one here, I've got one offsite. And I also keep for clients, I keep 6 months of weekly backups for exactly what you talked about. If you have a malware infection, I can go back. And honestly, if you're going back more than 6 months, you got a bigger problem usually. So,
Yeah.
but I believe in that. I also test my backups for all my clients on a regular basis, on a quarterly basis. So I make sure I can restore them and they're working properly. And
Yep.
that's kind of the way I roll with that. When it comes to data, whether it's my website, my business, or businesses I've consulted with coming from an enterprise background, I am a data backup whore, and I admit that. So I'm looking right beside me at two 14 terabyte external hard drives as we do this call. So
Wow.
I just you get where I'm coming from, right? And
Yep. Yep.
even outside of the web world, I've lost 4 hard drives in my lifetime over mechanical failures. I've never lost an ounce of data, so there is a reason I do what I do, and don't count on cloud services like Google Drive because they're really sync products. They're not backup products, and
Right.
we need to distinguish the difference between a sync product and a backup product as well.
Hmm. Yeah. I can see. I never thought about that, but yeah, I can definitely see a need to differentiate those two
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
the average user doesn't understand. That's the problem. And
Right.
I'm going through that. I just went through that with a client recently, where I actually have their on the outside of the website, I have their files going to a Google Drive that's downloaded via the applet. They're on a Windows box, so they get all their files synced down, and then I have their backup software backing that directory up on purpose because it's just the way it's got to be.
Hmm.
So,
I like it. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
thank
It's
you.
you can never have enough, in my opinion. That's why, people ask me even today, hey, so, does your service provide backups? Nope,
Yeah.
because it it's just one of those. It scares the daylights out of me. To be responsible for your database being clean, malware free, your files being malware free, basic protections and preventative measures in place that I can handle. But man, when it comes to backups, if you need a backup at 2 a.m. in the morning,
Yeah.
um, man, that just scares the daylights out of me. So nope, I avoid that like the plague.
And then the other thing I would tell clients is frequency matters. So if you're on a WooCommerce site doing, say, $10,000 in business a day, maybe you should be doing a couple backups a day, not just one. Maybe if you have a brochure site where you're posting a blog and a podcast, like most agency sites, unless there's a membership component, are basically brochure sites. Let's be fair. They're just complicated ones.
Right.
I back my personal setup once a day, and then I store a weekly offsite. So you got to kind of look at frequency, because frequency matters with this
Oh yeah.
kind of as well.
Especially with WooCommerce, that's such a convoluted or complicated
Yep.
system to begin with, and you got live orders coming through. How do you get everything updated? If you do restore a backup, now you got you're missing something. You're missing some
And you are
orders from the
orders.
database.
You almost on a Woo site have to export the orders, even on an infected site somewhere safe, then do your restore, and then the fun becomes you have to put it back together. And I've done that recently, and it's like you just kind of curse. It's like, why did they do this? And the reason I did it recently was because some intern thought having unsafe passwords was a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, which leads me to my next question. That's kind of a WordPressy question, but it's really a security question. Password managers, yes, no, kind of. Where do you
Yes,
sit?
definitely.
Okay.
I know you're going to ask which one, right?
No, I know which one I use, and I'm not on a Mac, so. and
Yeah,
it better not be LastPass, right? Like with
right,
the way,
exactly.
you
Use
know
any
that's
password manager you want, as long as it's not LastPass.
that story keeps getting worse and worse. I read the
Oh, I
other
know.
day there was more out there that they knew about and they didn't disclose. And
Yep.
so, what do you use? Are you a Bitwarden guy? I have to ask. Or?
I'm a one pass.
Okay.
Just I like it. Fell in love with it. They've had their issues as well.
Yep.
For the longest time, um, to be honest with you, I used Google's password manager
Yep.
in Chrome,
It's
and
gotten
people are like,
better.
"Oh, it's unsafe." No, it was at one time, but it's not any longer. You can't be Google and have something inferior. It's like when I used to bash Microsoft for Microsoft Defender. I remember telling myself, I got to keep on top of that, because at some point Microsoft is going to make this just an incredible product that's totally
Mhm.
integrated with Windows, and here we are.
Yep.
So,
Yep. They did that in a big way. I'm a Bitwarden guy personally, but
okay,
I mean, it's using it religiously every day. I've got most of my family on it. I have to tell you, I struggled with my now 78-year-old mother. She likes to keep her passwords in a Word document. I'm like, why? Not a good idea. If you want to print it, you can export them anyway. Like,
right,
and we got to be careful with passwords. We got to make sure that, God forbid anything happens to you or I, but there's a way that people can, in an emergency, get in this stuff. I've got an envelope in my deposit box in the house that says, in case of a medical emergency, open this. And it basically gives the PIN codes from my PC, my phone, because we know Apple will not release access to an iPhone if
nope,
somebody dies. We've had that, and people scream and say, nope, they just don't do it. So you have to put measures in place.
right.
And, it's good security hygiene, actually. So,
Yeah, it is. But yeah, you do have to have that. What do they call it? Hit by a bus day.
yep.
If that day ever comes and you get hit by a bus, things have. Lots of businesses are depending on you, and they need access to stuff. So it's got to be readily available, although it's got to be secure.
Yeah, and then kind of the last subject I wanted to touch on is hosting providers. And every time I bring this up in a conversation, everybody rolls their eyes at me and says, "Do we got to go there?" So yeah, we do. And hosting providers need to be your partner in security, not just a company that dumps on you and says, "Oh, we can clean it up for a fee." I think they should be doing more proactive at their end. What do you think about that?
I agree. We over this past year, we've made a number of strategic partnerships as a white label security service. But yeah, it really needs to be more, because at the start of this, you asked about how I got started. Well, when I first formed We Watch Your website and we were cleaning websites, I was hosting with Bluehost at the time. I know today everyone rolls their eyes at me, but I picked a hosting provider, and that's where I went. And so I was blogging like every day on the new infections I was finding, and get a call from a guy one day, and he says, just read your blog post. My boss's website just got hit by what you described, perfectly to a T. What can you tell me about it? I'm pretty technical. I'm like, oh, okay. So I figured he's not going to become a customer because he put that disclaimer in there that he's very technical. So, I mean, we talked for like an hour and a half. I told him how to clean it and everything else. So he's like, oh, great. Thanks. Get a call from him the next day. And he's like, hey, just want to let you know that information you gave me was awesome. Spot on. Helped my boss immensely. He's really happy. He's like, oh yeah, by the way, we see that you're hosting with us. I'm like, who are you? He's like, I'm Alex Lundquist. I'm a level 3 tech here at Bluehost. My boss is Matt Heaton, the founder.
Yeah.
How'd you like if we started sending customers your way? I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of busy. No. so yeah, I mean, like their terms of service people were told anybody calls in with a malware issue, send them to Tom Raef at We Watch Your website. And so I was inundated. But every so often I would find things that led me to believe that people didn't come in, because I've always done root cause analysis as best I can. And so even on their shared hosting accounts, I'd find websites that were hacked, and I couldn't identify any of the usual suspects. I'm like looking around, what the heck? And then, you could see the site getting reinfected almost as you're watching. So that led me looking at cron jobs, which uncovered a whole bunch of.
Oh, that's a whole minefield in itself, right?
Yeah, it is. And even to this day, it still is. But I also found like there was a lot of symlinks. And I'm like, where? So I started doing a deep dive on these symlinks. And the one time I sent their tech support people a list of all the websites that I could see from this one symlink on an infected website. And they were like, that shouldn't happen. I'm like, I agree, but here it is. How else would I get all this information? And they're like, oh, okay, we got to close that hole. So they did. So yeah, I mean, but hosting providers in general, could they do more? Yeah, but a lot of them are taking the stance that they don't want to have to beef up their tech support people, which is a cost of doing business. So they don't want to create a rabbit hole there. So they're going to do what they can and try and make it seem as they're doing as much as anybody else is doing, but they don't want to go overboard. So,
and then the other thing I sort of like to touch on is more for the agency crowd out there. A lot of us use management tools, main WP, manage WP, stuff like that. Make sure you lock those tools down like a drum. Like we were talking about IP blocking, and I use main WP, which is a self-hosted tool. I actually have my main WP set up that if it's not the IP address coming in from my house or my laptop on the road, it will accept no connection, no matter who it is, how it is, where it is. Because the problem with stuff like that is once you get into my main WP dashboard, you can have a field day at that point because you're already authenticated to all those sites. And I think those management tools can actually be a weak link, not a good link sometimes.
Yeah, and the whole thing. I was talking earlier about stolen session cookies.
Yep.
The whole thing there is, how easy it is to avoid that? You log out.
Yep.
When you're in your admin panel, if you log out,
every time,
immediately expires the session cookie.
Mm-hmm.
But most people will just go up, click the X, and close the window. Well, that leaves the session cookie open. Yep. And like on WordPress, the standard is the session cookie will stay active for 48 hours, unless if you click the remember me, it stays active for, 2 months?
2 months, yes.
So, just log out. Don't.
Help just, and then don't do all the silly people things do. As a lot of agency owners and freelancers like to go work in a coffee shop. Don't do it. Please, 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 please. I stood in a coffee shop one day and there was a guy as an experiment. And I used one of the tools and walked over to the guy and said, by the way, here's all your credit card passwords for the last hour. I suggest you do something just to make a point. And he just looked at me like, where did you get this data? So one of the things I do is I have a large data plan on my smartphone and I commute a lot around the GTA. I just tether to my phone and I'm done. And I don't worry about the stress. I go stay in a hotel. I don't do anything stupid. And I even go to a travel router that's got a firewall that connects to the hotel Wi-Fi, things like that. Like be smart. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Yeah. When, as I mentioned to you earlier, my wife and I, in 2016, we went to Ukraine. And we were there the entire summer. My wife is the data analyst, so she works remotely also. Well, at the time we had, people were like, oh, you're in the land of, of hackers at that point. How the heck did you stay safe? Yeah. And we're like, we tethered off our phone.
Yeah.
We didn't go through Wi-Fi anywhere.
I just don't do
tether
it.
off your phone and you're good to go.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, Tom, this conversation's been absolutely amazing. And thank you.
Been fun.
We need to do this again. No question. If somebody wants to find out about services, what you do, how you do it, where's the best way to go and how?
They can look at our ugly and way overdue to be updated website, wewatchyourwebsite.com. As I've got an old customer, Justin Korn from California. He's like, yeah, his website sucks, but his services don't. So I was going to put that as a tagline on my website.
I love that. You should.
Our website sucks, but our services don't. But anyway, or they can find me on
Facebook and Twitter and all the
Facebook,
places.
Twitter. Twitter, we're at WeWatch. They can find me on Skype, where we watch your website. They can email me at traef, TRAEF, at wewatchyourwebsite.com. Our carrier pigeons are on strike. Otherwise, they could do that. Still do smoke signals. Those are doing okay. So, in any way possible.
Yeah, thanks, Tom, and appreciate your time. You have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Rob. You as well. Thanks for the opportunity here.
Yeah, well, it's such a pleasure.
All right, take care. Bye.
This show is brought to you by StunningDigitalMarketing.com, your Toronto leader in digital marketing services. Not only do we protect your WordPress website, we can help you with your site, provide social media management for your business, or a very even special do one-on-one consulting. For joining find out more, this go to StunningDigitalMarketing.com. Hey everybody, Rob here again. Thanks for listening to the SDM show. It's such a pleasure to have you every week. If you want more on our agency website, go to stunningdigitalmarketing.com. We are your WordPress security experts. We'd be glad to help you out. If you want to learn more about me, Rob Cairns, go to meetrobcairns.online. From there, you can find links to everything I do on the web, as well as book time with me. So feel free. If you want to make comments about this podcast or know a guest possibly suitable for the podcast, please email us at podcast@stunningdigitalmarketing.com. Or conversely, you can go to X, formerly known as Twitter, and tweet at me at Rob Cairns. This podcast is dedicated to my late father, Bruce Cairns. Dad, I miss you very much, and I love you. Please join us next week for another interesting podcast, and have a great week, everybody. Bye for now.